At the crossroads, a man faces a pivotal choice. He either becomes stronger through self-discipline and purpose, or he falls into stagnation, isolation, and despair. The absence of a romantic partner doesn't just mean he lacks affection. It means he has no immediate external source of validation, no one to push him toward higher aspirations, no one to challenge his complacency. His habits and routine will follow him wherever he goes. There's no separation now. You might think, well, I don't need anyone else. I'm independent. I take care of myself. And sure, there's truth to that. Independence is vital. But let's be clear, living alone, truly alone, is not the same as being strong. Strength comes from engagement with the world, from taking on responsibility, from refining yourself in the presence of others. Here's the reality: you can trick yourself into believing that you're content in solitude. You wake up, you eat, you work, you play video games, you scroll through social media, you distract yourself. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and suddenly the silence in your apartment is no longer peaceful, it's deafening. The lack of another voice, another perspective, another challenge begins to eat away at your sense of purpose. But here's the key: if you're alone, you have two choices. You either use that solitude as an opportunity to build something meaningful, or you let it consume you. Because here's what happens to a man who lets isolation win. His discipline fades, his energy wanes, his ability to interact with the world erodes. He becomes passive. So what do? You structure your life with purpose. You cultivate discipline like your survival depends on it, because in many ways it does. You learn to cook, not just heat up junk food. You read not just to pass the time, but to refine your mind. You train your body, not just to look good, but because physical strength reinforces mental strength. And most importantly, you connect. If you don't have a romantic partner, that's fine, but you cannot be a man alone in the world. You must seek out friends, mentors, colleagues, communities. You must challenge yourself socially, or you will become invisible not just to others, but to yourself. The question isn't whether a man can live alone without a girlfriend. He can. The real question is whether he is truly alive in that solitude, or whether he's merely existing. And that, gentlemen, is entirely up to him. Living alone without a partner is a paradox of human existence. On one hand, it grants a man absolute freedom to structure his days as he pleases, to pursue his ambitions without compromise, to live unbound by the expectations or needs of another. There is a certain appeal in this autonomy, in the ability to move through life without external constraints. He can wake up when he chooses, eat what he likes, dedicate his time entirely to personal goals, and avoid the complications that relationships inevitably bring. For many men, especially those who have experienced difficult or unfulfilling relationships, solitude initially feels like a form of liberation, a chance to focus on self-improvement, career aspirations, or personal hobbies without distraction. Yet, beneath this surface of independence lies a deeper reality, one that often emerges only after an extended period of isolation. With freedom comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes the burden of managing one's own emotional and psychological well-being. When a man lives alone, he is solely accountable for how he navigates his inner world. There is no external force to regulate his emotions, no immediate companionship to provide warmth, no daily interactions that force him to step outside of his own thoughts. It is entirely up to him to maintain his sense of purpose, his motivation, his engagement with the world. And this is where solitude can become dangerous. For some men, solitude fosters discipline and self-reliance. They take the opportunity to refine their skills, cultivate knowledge, and develop a strong internal framework for resilience. They learn to manage their emotions without depending on validation from others, to take ownership of their failures, and to become the kind of man who can stand firmly on his own. This is the ideal outcome. Many men, however, instead of using solitude as a means of self-development, drift into patterns of stagnation. Without the external accountability that relationships often provide, they begin to lose their structure. Days become repetitive, devoid of challenge or novelty. The absence of another person to share thoughts and experiences with leads to an increasing detachment from the world. There is a deceptive comfort in isolation. When a man is alone, he avoids conflict, emotional turbulence, and the responsibilities that come with maintaining a relationship. But he also misses out on the very struggles that refine character and give life depth. Human beings are social creatures, wired for connection, and even the most independent men are not immune to the psychological effects of prolonged loneliness. Over time, solitude can dull the edges of ambition. A man may still go through the motions of his daily routine, but without shared experiences, without meaningful conversations, without the presence of another to challenge his thinking or provide support, his emotional landscape begins to shrink. He becomes more inwardly focused, his thoughts circling the same patterns, his perspective narrowing. And then one day he realizes something unsettling. The silence in his home, once peaceful, has become oppressive. The solitude, once a source of strength, now feels like a weight. The freedom that once seemed so appealing now carries a hidden cost, the burden of complete self-sufficiency. In a relationship, even in its most difficult moments, there is an external force that demands effort, growth, and adaptation. Alone, a man must generate this force himself. If he does not, he risks fading into a passive existence where life is merely something that happens, rather than something he actively engages with. The burden of solitude is not just the absence of companionship. It is the requirement of being one's own source of structure, motivation, and emotional stability. It is the challenge of maintaining momentum without external reinforcement. It is a test of whether a man can truly stand alone, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Some men rise to this challenge and become stronger because of it. Others, slowly and without realizing it, allow solitude to erode their sense of purpose. And in the end, whether solitude becomes a blessing or a curse is determined by the choices a man makes in the silence of his own company. Discipline is the cornerstone of a man's existence. When he walks through life alone, without a partner to provide external validation, emotional support, or shared responsibility, he must rely entirely on his own ability to create order and structure. This is both a challenge and an opportunity, a test of whether he can impose the necessary structure upon himself or whether he will allow his life to drift into aimlessness. Without discipline, solitude quickly turns into stagnation, and the absence of external accountability can lead to a slow erosion of ambition, purpose, and self-respect. A man who is alone has no one to remind him of his goals, no one to encourage him to get up early, no one to reinforce good habits or call him out when he slips into complacency. He must become his own authority, his own source of motivation. This requires an internal framework of discipline strong enough to resist the temptations of comfort, distraction, and procrastination. It is easy to let time slip away when there is no one waiting for you, no one relying on you, no shared vision pulling you forward. A day without structure quickly becomes a week without progress, and before long, months pass without any real movement toward anything meaningful. Discipline is not about rigid control or punishment. It is about the ability to make decisions that align with a greater purpose, even when there is no immediate reward. A man must train himself to wake up with a mission, to establish routines that reinforce his growth, to set goals and pursue them with unwavering focus. He cannot afford to be ruled by fleeting emotions or momentary desires, because in solitude, no one will correct him when he veers off course. If he lacks discipline, his habits will deteriorate. His sleep schedule will become inconsistent, his diet will decline, his physical health will suffer, and his mental clarity will diminish. He may rationalize his lack of structure by convincing himself that he is simply enjoying his freedom, but in reality he is allowing his potential to decay. Discipline in solitude extends beyond mere routine. It is about the ability to manage one's mind, to maintain control over thoughts, emotions, and impulses. Without the emotional regulation that comes from shared experiences, a man must cultivate inner stability. He must learn to sit with his own thoughts, to work through moments of doubt and loneliness without resorting to self-destructive behaviors. He must be able to push forward when motivation fades, because without discipline, motivation is fleeting and unreliable. There's also a deeper psychological component to discipline. When a man commits to structure, he builds self-respect. He proves to himself that he is capable of mastery, that he can impose order on his own existence. This is crucial because in solitude, a man's relationship with himself is paramount. If he allows himself to slip into laziness, indulgence, or apathy, he begins to lose trust in his own abilities. But if he demonstrates discipline through consistent effort, through self-imposed challenges, through the pursuit of excellence, he develops an unshakable belief in himself. This self-belief becomes his foundation, his guiding force when there is no external reinforcement. A man who lives alone must view discipline not as an option, but as a necessity for survival. T is the force that keeps his mind sharp, his body strong, and his purpose clear. It is what prevents him from being swallowed by the inertia of isolation. The world does not owe him structure, nor will it impose it upon him. He must create it for himself every day without excuse, because without discipline, solitude does not make a man free, it makes him lost. Solitude, when used wisely, can be a powerful tool for self-reflection and growth. It allows a man to step away from distractions, to analyze his life, to refine his thoughts, and to cultivate independence. Many great minds throughout history have embraced solitude as a means of deep introspection, finding clarity and strength in the absence of noise. However, there is a fine line between solitude and isolation, and when that line is crossed, the benefits of being alone begin to erode. What was once a period of productive reflection can slowly turn into stagnation, detachment, and an alarming loss of social competence. At first, isolation may not seem dangerous. It often starts subtly. A man spends more time by himself, prioritizing personal projects, enjoying the freedom of being unburdened by social obligations. He tells himself that he is simply focusing on his goals, that he doesn't need constant interaction to be fulfilled. And in truth, there is a certain appeal to living in one's own world, unshaped by the influence of others. The problem arises when solitude becomes the default state rather than a temporary retreat. The longer a man remains isolated, the more his perception of reality becomes distorted. One of the first signs of unhealthy isolation is stagnation. Without social interactions to provide feedback, challenge ideas, or introduce new perspectives, a man's thinking begins to loop in predictable patterns. His ambitions may fade because there is no external reinforcement pushing him forward. When left entirely to his own devices without external accountability, it becomes easier to settle into routines that lack growth. He may still convince himself that he's working toward something meaningful, but without exposure to the world outside his own mind, his progress slows. There is no friction, no challenge, no sense of urgency. Life becomes comfortable, but comfort in isolation often leads to decay. Beyond stagnation, prolonged isolation fosters detachment. Human beings are inherently social creatures. Interaction is wired into our psychology. When a man removes himself from social circles for too long, his ability to connect with others begins to weaken. The rhythms of conversation, the nuances of body language, the unspoken rules of social engagement, all of these skills require practice. When a man isolates himself, he loses touch with them. He becomes increasingly comfortable in his own presence, but less capable in the presence of others. Over time, he may begin to feel out of sync with the world, as if he is watching life unfold from behind a glass barrier. This detachment doesn't just affect how he interacts with others, it changes how he perceives himself. When a man is alone for too long, he can start to see himself through a warped lens. He may become overly critical, magnifying his flaws without external reassurance, or he may go in the opposite direction, building an inflated self-image that isn't tested by real-world interactions. In either case, isolation skews self-perception, making it harder to reintegrate into social life. Perhaps the most alarming consequence of prolonged isolation is the gradual loss of social competence. Social skills, like any other ability, require regular use. A man who isolates himself for too long will find that when he does attempt to re-engage, he struggles. Conversations feel awkward, he second-guesses his words, he misreads social cues. And because these experiences are uncomfortable, he may withdraw further, reinforcing the cycle of isolation. Over time, he convinces himself that he simply doesn't fit in, that he is better off alone. But this is not because he is incapable of connection. It is because he has neglected the skills required to connect. Isolation is insidious because it often feels like a choice, even when it has become a trap. The longer a man stays in it, the harder it is to break free. The world moves on without him, friendships fade, reintegration becomes more difficult. But the solution is not complicated. It requires conscious effort. A man must actively seek engagement, even when it feels unnatural at first. he must push himself into uncomfortable social situations, challenge his own excuses, and recognize that solitude, when overindulged, ceases to be a strength and becomes a weakness. Solitude is a tool, but isolation is a disease. If a man does not guard against it, he risks waking up one day to find that he has not only lost his connection to the world, but more importantly, his connection to himself. Masculine growth is forged through challenge. A man without a romantic partner does not have the built-in responsibilities, emotional exchanges, and daily interactions that a relationship naturally provides. Without this dynamic force pushing him forward, he must deliberately seek out challenges elsewhere, lest he drift into complacency. Growth does not happen in comfort, it happens in adversity. A man who is alone must decide whether his solitude will be a catalyst for transformation or an excuse for stagnation. Without the external structure of a relationship, a man must create his own path toward growth. This means engaging with the world in meaningful ways, taking on responsibilities, and setting ambitious goals. The worst mistake a man can make in solitude is to slip into a passive existence, filling his time with distractions rather than purpose. It is easy to waste days, weeks, even years in meaningless entertainment, consuming rather than creating, avoiding struggle rather than embracing it. But growth demands friction. It demands that a man put himself in situations where he must rise to meet the challenge. Physical discipline is one of the most direct ways to cultivate masculine growth. Training the body is not just about aesthetics or health, it is about mastering oneself. The gym, the dojo, the running trail, these places are not merely spaces for exercise, but arenas where a man confronts his limits. Lifting weights teaches patience and perseverance. Martial arts teach discipline and resilience. Endurance training cultivates mental toughness. A man who commits to physical excellence is not just sculpting his body, he is forging his character. He is proving to himself day after day that he can push through pain, discomfort, and fatigue. This strength carries over into all other areas of life. Beyond the physical, a man must challenge himself intellectually and creatively. Without a relationship to provide intellectual stimulation through conversation and shared perspectives, he must seek knowledge, actively reading, learning new skills, engaging in deep work. These are the mental equivalents of lifting heavy weights. A man should be expanding his mind, questioning his beliefs, refining his thoughts. He should take on projects that stretch his capabilities, whether it is writing, building, coding, or creating. Complacency thrives in routine. Growth thrives in challenge. If a man does not push his intellect, he risks falling into a stagnant, passive way of thinking where his mind becomes dull and untested. Social engagement is another critical area where a man must challenge himself. It is easy to withdraw from social life when there is no partner drawing him into shared experiences. But isolation, when unchecked, weakens social intelligence. A man must be deliberate in building and maintaining relationships with friends, mentors, colleagues, and even strangers. He should seek out environments where he is forced to interact, where he must learn to communicate effectively, where he must navigate different personalities and perspectives. Social competence is a skill, and like any skill, it deteriorates if not practiced. Purpose is perhaps the most significant challenge a man must embrace. Without the external validation and emotional connection of a partner, a man must define his own mission. This mission cannot be vague or half-hearted. It must be something that drives him forward every day. Whether it is career ambition, creative pursuits, athletic excellence, or a deeper philosophical journey, a man must wake up with a sense of direction. A man with a mission does not need distractions to fill his time. His time is already accounted for, devoted to something greater than himself. Solitude is neither good nor bad, it is what a man makes of it. Used correctly, it becomes a period of immense growth, a time to sharpen his mind, strengthen his body, deepen his character, and refine his purpose. Used poorly, it becomes an excuse for comfort, laziness, and avoidance. A man who understands the necessity of challenge does not fear solitude, he uses it as fuel. He seeks adversity, knowing that every hardship overcome makes him stronger. And in doing so, he transforms not only his life but himself. Human beings are inherently social creatures, and no man, no matter how independent or self-sufficient, can thrive in complete isolation. While solitude can be valuable for self-reflection and personal growth, prolonged detachment from social interaction leads to loneliness, stagnation, and even nihilism. A man without a romantic relationship must not mistake being alone for being disconnected. He must actively engage with the world, build meaningful relationships, and foster a sense of belonging within his community. Without strong social bonds, he risks falling into a void where his sense of purpose and identity slowly erode. Friendships serve as one of the most essential pillars of a man's social life. A strong circle of friends provides camaraderie, support, and accountability. Through shared experiences, challenges, and discussions, friendships offer a source of motivation and perspective that cannot be found in isolation. Men sharpen one another through competition, collaboration, and honest feedback. A man surrounded by good friends is less likely to fall into self-destructive habits or allow complacency to take root. His friends challenge him, encourage him, and remind him of his worth when he begins to doubt himself. But friendships do not maintain themselves, they require effort. A man must take the initiative to reach out, to organize gatherings, to be present in the lives of those he values. Passively waiting for social interactions to happen leads only to further isolation. Beyond friendships, mentors play a crucial role in a man's development. Without a romantic partner, a man must be even more intentional about seeking guidance from. There's a truth about men that we don't often talk about. When a man is broken, you will see it. It's written in his posture, his speech, his decisions, and his very presence in the world. A broken man doesn't have to announce his pain, it leaks through the cracks in his soul. The weight of his burdens reshapes him, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. But make no mistake, when a man is broken, it is evident. Today, we will explore 8 key signs of a broken man, not to judge, but to understand. Because understanding is the first step to healing. A man who is whole engages with the world. He moves with purpose, interacts with confidence, and makes his presence known. But when a man is broken, one of the first things you'll notice is his withdrawal. He starts pulling away from people, from opportunities, from life itself. He doesn't do this out of preference. He does it because the world has become too heavy to bear. This withdrawal manifests in different ways. Some men physically isolate themselves, they stop attending social gatherings, avoid family functions, and decline invitations they once would have eagerly accepted. Others may still be present in body but absent in spirit. They sit at the table with their loved ones, but they don't engage. Their responses become shorter, their enthusiasm fades, and they stop contributing to conversations, choosing instead to simply exist in the background. You see this happen in men who have suffered a great loss, a failed marriage, the death of a loved one, a career collapse. Take, for example, a man who built a business from the ground up, investing years of his life into something he believed in. Then one day it crumbles, maybe due to economic downturns, bad decisions, or forces beyond his control. The external failure is devastating, but the internal collapse is worse. He no longer sees himself as the ambitious, capable man he once was. And instead of seeking help or guidance, he turns inward. He disappears. And this disappearance doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. Maybe he used to be active in a community group, but suddenly stops attending. Maybe he used to be the guy who always checked in on friends, but now his messages are rare. The problem is, the more he withdraws, the deeper the pit he digs for himself. Isolation feeds depression, and the longer he stays in that cycle, the harder it becomes to break out of it. In some cases, withdrawal isn't just about avoiding people, it's about avoiding life's demands altogether. A broken man might stop caring about his responsibilities. His work performance declines, he loses motivation to take care of his home, his finances, his own well-being. If you look closely, you'll see the signs: unopened mail piling up, missed deadlines, a home that used to be neat now filled with clutter. These are symptoms of a man who is checked out mentally and emotionally. What makes this dangerous is that the longer a man stays in isolation, the more his mind convinces him that he's alone, that no one understands his pain, that no one would care if he vanished completely. And once he starts believing that, it becomes incredibly difficult to reach him. This is why it's crucial to recognize the signs early, to step in before he's too far gone. Purpose is one of the most fundamental driving forces in a man's life. It is the thing that gives him direction, that pushes him forward even in the face of hardship. When a man has a strong sense of purpose, he has energy, determination, and resilience. He wakes up each morning with something to strive for, something that makes the struggle worth it. But when a man is broken, his purpose begins to erode. It's not always sudden, it often happens gradually, like a candle burning out over time. At first, he may just feel a little lost. He starts questioning whether what he's working toward really matters. Then that doubt turns into disinterest. Soon he finds himself waking up in the morning with no real motivation. The fire that once burned inside him is reduced to embers. This happens in different areas of life. Some men lose their sense of purpose in their careers. Maybe they spent years climbing the corporate ladder, only to realize one day that they feel empty at the top. Or maybe they lose their job unexpectedly, and with it, their identity. A man who tied his entire self-worth to his ability to provide will feel utterly lost if that ability is taken from him. For other men, the loss of purpose happens in relationships. A man who devoted himself to his marriage, only to have it fall apart, might question everything. He might wonder, what was the point of all those years? He might feel as though all the love, effort, and sacrifices he made were for nothing. And when a man starts believing that his efforts don't matter, that nothing he does will lead to anything meaningful, he stops trying. You see this in men who once had big dreams, but now settle for just getting through the day. Maybe he was once passionate about art, writing, building, or teaching, but somewhere along the line, life wore him down. Maybe he faced too many rejections. Maybe his efforts weren't appreciated. Maybe the people around him dismissed his aspirations as unrealistic. Whatever the reason, he eventually gave up on the things that once gave him joy. There's a tragic predictability to this. A man without purpose doesn't just become indifferent, he becomes resentful. He starts to envy those who still have direction. He becomes cynical about success, dismissing others' achievements as luck or privilege. Deep down, he doesn't hate the world, he hates what he's lost within himself. And here's where it gets dangerous. When a man has no purpose, he becomes susceptible to destructive habits. Without something meaningful to pour his energy into, he turns to distractions. Some men dive into endless hours of entertainment, numbing themselves with television, video games, or mindless scrolling. Others seek out self-destructive behaviors, drinking excessively, gambling, or engaging in reckless activities. They do these things not because they truly enjoy them, but because they have nothing else to live for. There's a saying that a man without purpose is like a ship without a rudder. He may still be moving, but he's going nowhere. He drifts through life, letting the current take him wherever it pleases. And before he knows it, years have passed, and he looks back with regret, wondering where his time went. This is why losing a sense of purpose is one of the most painful experiences a man can go through. Because when a man believes his life has no meaning, he stops living. He merely exists. When a man is broken, his body often tells the story before his words do. You'll see it in the way he carries himself, in the way he moves or doesn't move. A man who once stood tall, shoulders squared, with an air of confidence, now walks sluggishly, his posture slouched, as if the weight of life itself has become unbearable. His physical state begins to deteriorate, not necessarily because he doesn't care, but because he no longer sees the point in taking care of himself. One of the first signs is a decline in basic self-care. A man who is suffering internally may stop grooming himself the way he used to. He might neglect shaving, his hair might become unkempt, his clothing might appear wrinkled or mismatched. This isn't simply a matter of style, it's an outward reflection of chaos. When a man feels broken, even the simplest task like taking a shower or putting together a decent outfit can feel like an unnecessary burden. Then there's his diet. When a man is in a good place mentally and emotionally, he often puts effort into what he eats. He understands that fueling his body properly gives him the energy to tackle life's challenges. But when he's broken, his eating habits spiral. Some men lose their appetite completely, skipping meals, running on caffeine, or mindlessly snacking without proper nutrition. Others go to the opposite extreme, overeating as a form of comfort, indulging in junk food, fast food, or excessive alcohol consumption. The reasoning is simple. When life feels out of control, unhealthy foods provide an easy, immediate source of pleasure. But it's a short-lived escape, one that only compounds the problem over time. Exercise is another major indicator. A man who is mentally strong understands the value of physical fitness, not just for aesthetics, but for discipline, confidence, and overall well-being. But when he's broken, he abandons this. He stops going to the gym, stops running, stops engaging in any activity that requires effort. His body starts to weaken, his stamina declines, his strength fades, and the worst part, he knows it. He knows he's letting himself go, but in his current state, he just doesn't care. Consider a man who was once a dedicated athlete, someone who thrived on pushing his physical limits. Then life knocks him down. Maybe he faces a crushing failure, a devastating breakup, or the loss of a loved one. Instead of using physical activity to cope, he withdraws. He starts spending more time on the couch, binge-watching shows, drowning in distractions. The longer he stays in this cycle, the harder it becomes to break free. His once strong body becomes sluggish and his mind follows. Because the truth is, neglecting the body is not just about physical deterioration, it's a direct reflection of mental defeat. Over time, this neglect turns into illness. Poor diet, lack of movement, and high stress levels contribute to real, tangible health problems. Weight gain, high blood pressure, chronic fatigue, and even more serious conditions like heart disease or depression. And yet, instead of addressing the root of the problem, he convinces himself that he's just tired, just unmotivated, just in a phase. But it's not a phase, it's a slow and steady decline. And unless he finds a reason to fight back, he will sink deeper into it. A strong, well-balanced man has control over his emotions. He doesn't fly into rage over minor inconveniences, nor does he break down at the first sign of struggle. But when a man is broken, his emotional regulation begins to falter. Small things that once wouldn't have bothered him now set him off. He becomes impatient, easily annoyed, even volatile. You see this especially in how he interacts with others. A man who is suffering internally may lash out at those around him not because they've done anything wrong, but because he's carrying an enormous burden he doesn't know how to express. His tone becomes sharper, his words more cutting. He may snap at his friends, his partner, his children, even strangers. And the worst part? He regrets it almost instantly. But instead of apologizing, he withdraws even further, convinced that no one would understand what he's going through. For some men, this irritation manifests as anger. He becomes easily frustrated, losing his temper over things that never used to bother him. The traffic jam that he once sat through patiently now fills him with rage. The small mistake at work that he used to brush off now feels like an attack. It's not the situation itself that's changed, it's him. His patience has worn thin because internally he's struggling with something far bigger. For others, emotional instability takes the form of deep sadness. He becomes more sensitive, more prone to shutting down completely. Things that once brought him joy now feel meaningless. He might find himself tearing up at unexpected moments, overwhelmed by emotions he doesn't know how to process. And because society teaches men to suppress their emotions rather than deal with them, he doesn't seek help. He simply internalizes the pain. A common example of this can be seen in men going through a tough breakup or divorce. The pain of losing a partner, especially if he truly loved her, can feel like a betrayal of everything he believed in. And instead of grieving in a healthy way, he suppresses it. But that pain doesn't just disappear, it shows up in other ways. He becomes irritable, dismissive, even cruel at times. He might push people away, or he might throw himself into meaningless distractions, seeking temporary relief instead of addressing the real issue. This emotional instability also impacts his decision-making. A man who is in a good place mentally thinks rationally, weighing his options carefully. But a broken man, he acts on impulse. He might quit his job suddenly, break off friendships without explanation, or make reckless financial decisions. He's not thinking long-term, he's reacting to the chaos inside him. Perhaps one of the most dangerous aspects of this emotional instability is self-sabotage. A broken man might push away the very people who want to help him. He might refuse support, believing that he has to deal with everything on his own. And the deeper he sinks into isolation, the worse his emotional state becomes. The saddest part, most men don't even realize they're doing this. They don't recognize that their irritability, their mood swings, their emotional withdrawal are symptoms of something deeper. They just think they're having a rough time. But left unchecked, this instability can lead to severe consequences: strained relationships, lost opportunities, and even long-term mental health struggles. A broken man is not just struggling with sadness, he is struggling with an internal battle that affects every aspect of his life. And until he acknowledges the damage, until he finds the strength to face what's truly breaking him, the cycle will continue. When a man is broken, one of the most telling signs is his withdrawal from relationships. He distances himself from friends, family, and even romantic partners. It's not that he necessarily wants to be alone deep down. He may crave connection, but his pain makes it difficult to engage with others. A man in a healthy state understands the value of relationships. He knows that friendships, mentorships, and family ties provide support, perspective, and meaning. But when he's broken, he begins to see those same relationships as burdens. Conversations feel exhausting, social gatherings feel like a chore, even a simple check in text feels like an obligation he'd rather avoid. So he stops responding. He makes excuses. He starts declining invitations, saying he's busy when in reality, he's just lying in bed, lost in his thoughts. One of the main reasons for this isolation is shame. A man who is struggling doesn't want others to see him in a weakened state. He feels like a failure, and instead of reaching out for help, he convinces himself that no one will understand, or worse, that no one cares. He tells himself, "Why should I burden them with my problems?" And so he retreats further into solitude, believing that suffering in silence is the best course of action. This withdrawal can be particularly damaging in romantic relationships. A man who was once deeply engaged, affectionate, and emotionally available may suddenly become distant. His partner will notice his responses become shorter, his touch less frequent, his interest in shared activities fades. When she asks what's wrong, he either brushes it off or snaps back with irritation. It's not that he's stopped loving her, it's that he feels incapable of being the man he once was. And rather than risk vulnerability, he chooses to shut down. There's also the issue of pride. Many men are conditioned to believe that seeking help is a sign of weakness. So instead of confiding in a close friend or seeking professional guidance, they bottle everything up. They sit in silence, hoping time will fix things, unaware that isolation only makes the wound deeper. And then there's the danger of self-sabotage. Some men, feeling unworthy of love or support, will actively push people away. They'll start unnecessary arguments, become unreasonably critical, or simply ghost those who care about them. This is their way of subconsciously confirming their worst fear, that they are alone. A real-life example of this can be seen in men who experience career failure. Imagine a man who worked tirelessly to build his business, only to see it collapse. He feels humiliated, lost. Instead of leaning on his loved ones, he vanishes. He ignores calls from friends, avoids family gatherings, and cuts ties with mentors who once guided him. The very people who could help him rebuild are shut out because, in his mind, facing them means confronting his own failure. But the tragic irony of isolation is that it creates a vicious cycle. The more a man pulls away, the more disconnected he becomes. The more disconnected he becomes, the harder it is to pull himself out of the darkness. And without intervention, this isolation can lead to deeper issues, severe depression, destructive habits, or even suicidal thoughts. A broken man often turns to self-destructive behavior as a way of numbing his pain. These behaviors can range from excessive drinking to reckless spending, substance abuse, gambling, or even destructive relationships. When a man loses hope, he begins to take actions that accelerate his downfall rather than pull him out of it. For some, alcohol becomes the escape. A drink here and there turns into a bottle a night. It starts as a coping mechanism, just something to take the edge off, but before long it becomes a habit, then a dependency. The problem isn't just the alcohol itself, but the mindset behind it. A man who drinks to forget is a man who's given up on fixing what's wrong. For others, the self-destruction is financial. A man who once carefully managed his money might suddenly become reckless, making impulsive purchases, gambling, or drowning himself in debt. This isn't because he enjoys spending. It's because, in his broken state, long-term consequences don't matter. He tells himself, "What's the point in saving? What's the point in planning for the future when everything already feels lost?" Then there's substance abuse. whether it's prescription medication, illegal drugs, or excessive caffeine and nicotine consumption. A broken man seeks any substance that will dull the pain even temporarily. He's not looking for a solution, he's looking for an escape. And the deeper he falls into these vices, the harder it becomes to find his way back. But self-destruction isn't always external, it can also be psychological. A man who has lost his sense of purpose may sabotage his own success. He stops showing up to work on time, turns in half-hearted efforts, and loses motivation for any sort of achievement. He might reject new opportunities, dismiss personal growth, and avoid any situation that could force him to confront his pain. Consider a man who was once passionate about his career, but then experiences a devastating failure. Instead of picking himself up, learning from the experience and pushing forward, he lets the failure define him. He stops trying. He starts procrastinating, missing deadlines, avoiding responsibility. It's not that he lacks skill or intelligence, he simply doesn't believe in himself anymore. And rather than face the possibility of failing again, he chooses to self-sabotage. Perhaps the most dangerous form of self-destruction comes in relationships. A broken man may seek out toxic dynamics, relationships filled with drama, manipulation, or emotional abuse. Why? Because deep down, a hug from a man is more than just a simple act of daily life. It carries something worth understanding, something meaningful beneath the surface that warrants careful reflection. To assume otherwise is to miss the subtle language of human interaction, a language that reveals much about the giver, the receiver, and the space that exists between them. When a man gives a hug, it's not merely a physical act, it is a revelation, an unspoken statement layered with context, intention, and emotion. To interpret it, you must first consider the nature of the relationship. Is this a close friend, a partner, a family member, or someone you've just met? Each context frames the gesture differently, and while the action may look identical from the outside, its meaning shifts depending on the relational foundation upon which it is built. The human body, particularly in moments of intimacy like a hug, communicates truths that words often fail to capture. A man who extends his arms in an embrace is offering something of himself, a sense of warmth, reassurance, or perhaps even vulnerability. Vulnerability in itself is a significant act. To allow oneself to be vulnerable is to risk being seen fully without pretense or defense. For many men shaped by societal expectations to remain stoic or emotionally reserved, this act carries even greater weight. It's an offering of trust, a gesture that says, "Here I am. Take from this what you will, but know that I give it willingly." However, not every hug carries the same level of depth. The world of human interaction is rife with nuance, and not every gesture is imbued with profound meaning. Yet, even the simplest acts are not devoid of significance. A casual hug, for instance, may signal camaraderie or a sense of belonging in acknowledgement of your presence and a marker of shared humanity. But if the hug lingers, if there is a pause that stretches beyond the ordinary, you must ask yourself why. What is being communicated in the space of that extended moment? Is it affection, sorrow, or something deeper that words cannot encapsulate? Men, like all human beings, are not monolithic in their behaviors. Some men are naturally more tactile, expressing their emotions and connections through physical touch. For others, a hug might be a rare event, reserved for only the most significant occasions or people. This distinction matters because it shapes the interpretive lens through which the gesture must be viewed. To understand what a hug from a man means, you must understand the man himself, his emotional vocabulary, his norms and values regarding touch and expression. Without these insights, assumptions risk misinterpretation. Moreover, the act of a hug is not isolated from the broader cultural and societal frameworks within which it occurs. In some cultures, physical affection is abundant and expected, a natural part of human connection. In others, it is rare and carries connotations of intimacy that extend beyond the physical. A man raised in a culture where hugs are commonplace may not consider them significant, while another raised in a more reserved environment may view the act as monumental. Context matters, as does the willingness to understand that the meaning of a gesture is often rooted in the personal and cultural narratives of the one who offers it. Now consider the emotional state of the man giving the hug. Is he offering comfort? If so, what does he perceive in you that requires solace? A comforting hug is not a mere formality, it is an acknowledgement of your pain or distress. It is an unspoken statement. I see you and I care enough to share in this moment with you. But comfort can also flow in the opposite direction. A man might hug you not because you need it, but because he does. And so if there is a purpose for hugging, it becomes the greatest possible contribution. Perhaps he is seeking reassurance, a grounding presence in a world that feels overwhelming or uncertain. In such moments, the act of giving is simultaneously an act of asking, a silent plea for connection amidst isolation. Romantic contexts too complicate the interpretation of a hug. Physical touch is often laden with the weight of desire, affection, or burgeoning attachment. When a man hugs you in such a context, it is not merely a gesture, it is a declaration. The nature of that declaration depends on the specifics of the relationship. Is he tentative, unsure of how his gesture will be received, or is he confident, his embrace firm and unyielding? These subtleties speak volumes about the dynamics at play, about the unspoken negotiations of closeness and boundaries that occur within every human interaction. But even in romantic contexts, not every hug is rooted in desire. Sometimes a hug is simply about presence, a way of saying, I'm here and I want you to know that. This kind of hug transcends the physical. It is a bridge, a momentary suspension of the barriers that separate two people. It is, in many ways, an expression of the divine, an acknowledgement of the sacredness of connection in a world that often feels fractured and distant. There is also an inherent risk in any hug, particularly for men in a society that often misinterprets male intentions or scrutinizes their every move. Offering a hug can feel like stepping into uncertain territory. What if the gesture is misunderstood? What if it is rejected? These questions linger in the background, shaping the way a man approaches physical expressions of care. Yet, when a man chooses to hug despite these risks, it is a testament to his willingness to engage in genuine connection, even in the face of potential discomfort. It's important, too, to consider what happens after the hug. Does he linger in the moment, his hands resting gently on your shoulders, as if to ensure the connection remains intact, or does he step back quickly, as though retreating from a vulnerability he is unaccustomed to showing? These postures reveal much about the emotional weight of the gesture, about the layers of meaning that cannot be fully unpacked in words, but are instead felt in the lingering echoes of touch. At its core, a hug is about more than physical closeness. It is an act of recognition and acknowledgement of shared humanity. When a man gives you a hug, you can assume that, at least in that moment, he sees you not just as an individual, but as someone worthy of connection, care, and presence. That recognition, however fleeting, is a powerful reminder of what it means to be human, to long for connection, to offer and receive comfort, and to navigate the complex, beautiful web of relationships that define our existence. To understand a hug, you must approach it with curiosity and attentiveness. What does this gesture reveal about the man who offers it? What does it say about the dynamics between you? And what does it teach you about the universal need for connection that binds us all? These questions are not easily answered, nor should they be. For the beauty of a hug lies in its mystery, in the unspoken truths it carries, and in the way it invites us to ponder the depth of human connection, one embrace at a time. A hug often transcends the act itself, reaching into the fabric of our shared experiences and vulnerabilities. It is not just about the touch, it's about the moment, the shared emotion, and the mutual acknowledgement of existence. Happiness is not a feeling, but an effort that gives meaning, direction, and liberation. It gives the act of hugging a purpose, and it exists when a man gives you a hug. It is a bridge between two lives, even if only for a fleeting moment. This bridge carries unspoken dialogues, a flow of energy that communicates without words, and this energy tells a story about what it means to be connected in a world that often feels isolated. Think of the subtle dynamics of a hug, the pressure, the duration, and even the posture. Each element offers a narrative. A tight embrace might convey urgency or intensity, as though the man is holding on to you, not wanting the connection to slip away. A light, fleeting hug might suggest hesitance or a sense of formality. The way he holds his arms, the placement of his hands, and the way he steps into the gesture all contribute to the unspoken language of connection. These details, often overlooked, are where the depth of human interaction resides. For a man, offering a hug can sometimes be an act of defiance, not against another person, but against his own fears, insecurities, or the internalized norms that have shaped him. Many men are taught to suppress physical affection, to shield themselves behind walls of stoicism. Yet the decision to hug is, in itself, a breaking of those barriers. It is an invitation to intimacy, however brief, and it reflects an openness that is both courageous and profound. When he chooses to embrace, he chooses to step into a space of vulnerability, risking rejection or misinterpretation in favor of connection. And let's consider the receiver of the hug. When you are hugged, you are placed in a position of power, even if momentarily. You hold the capacity to accept or reject the gesture, to reciprocate or to withdraw. How you respond shapes the interaction, sometimes more than the hug itself. If you lean into it, wrapping your arms around him in return, you create a mutual acknowledgement, a shared moment that reinforces the bond between you. If you hesitate or stiffen, you send a different signal, one that speaks to boundaries, uncertainty, or discomfort. This interplay of action and reaction is what gives a hug its layered complexity. A hug also has the power to bypass the intellectual and tap directly into the emotional. Words can be carefully crafted, calculated to achieve a specific response, but touch is immediate, primal, and unfiltered. When a man hugs you, he is communicating from a place beyond language. He is saying something that words cannot capture, a sentiment that exists in the realm of feeling, not thought. And this is where the true power of a hug lies, in its ability to connect us to one another on a level that is both instinctual and deeply human. There is also the element of memory. A hug has the potential to leave an imprint, not just on the body but on the soul. Think about the hugs you remember, those moments of embrace that have stayed with you over the years. Perhaps it was a hug that comforted you in a time of grief, or one that celebrated a shared triumph. These moments linger because they resonate with something fundamental within us, a longing for connection that transcends time and space. When a man hugs you, he may not be aware of the significance of the moment, but its impact can ripple outward, shaping the way you see him and perhaps the way you see yourself. Now delve into the realm of intention. What motivates a man to give a hug? Is it purely spontaneous, a response to the moment, or is it deliberate, a calculated decision to express something specific? The answer often lies in the context. In moments of joy, a hug can be an instinctive reaction, a way of sharing the overflow of positive emotion. In moments of sorrow, it can be an intentional gesture of support, a way of saying, "You don't have to face this alone." Understanding the intention behind the act is key to grasping its full meaning. But intention is not always straightforward. Human beings are complex, and our motivations are often layered and multifaceted. A man may hug you because he wants to comfort you, but he may also be seeking comfort himself. He may hug you as an expression of gratitude, or he may do so out of a sense of obligation, feeling that it is the right thing to do in a given situation. These layers of intention add to the richness of the act, reminding us that even the simplest gestures can carry profound depth. The question of trust is another critical element. When a man hugs you, he is, in a sense, asking for your trust. He is inviting you into a space of closeness, a space where the boundaries between self and other become blurred. To accept the hug is to accept that invitation, to step into that shared space and meet him in it. But trust is a fragile thing, easily broken and not easily repaired. If the hug is perceived as insincere or unwelcome, it can create distance rather than closeness, reinforcing barriers instead of breaking them down. There is also a spiritual dimension to a hug, one that often goes unspoken but is deeply felt. In the act of embracing, there is a sense of unity, a momentary dissolving of the boundaries that separate us. It is as though, for that brief instant, you and the other person become one, connected by a shared humanity that transcends the individual. This spiritual connection is what makes a hug so powerful. It is a reminder of the divine spark within each of us, a reflection of the interconnectedness that underpins all of existence. In some ways, a hug is a microcosm of the human experience. It is a moment of connection framed by the complexities of intention, context, and emotion. It is an act that requires courage, vulnerability, and trust, and it has the power to create memories that last a lifetime. When a man gives you a hug, he is offering you a glimpse into his world, a world shaped by his experiences, his values, and his understanding of what it means to connect. And in that glimpse, there is a profound opportunity to see not only him, but also yourself reflected in the shared moment of connection. So if a man gives you a hug, you can assume that there is meaning in it, even if that meaning is not immediately clear. You can assume that he is reaching out, offering a piece of himself in a gesture that is both simple and profound. And you can assume that in that moment you are not alone, that at least for a fleeting instant, you are part of something greater, something that speaks to the very essence of what it means to be human. In the end, a hug is never just a hug. It's a profound expression of connection, carrying layers of meaning that extend beyond the physical act. When a man gives you a hug, he's communicating something about himself, his emotions, and his intentions. Whether it's a gesture of comfort, affection, or a simple acknowledgement of shared humanity, it's an offering of vulnerability, trust, and sometimes even courage, especially in a world that often discourages men from expressing their feelings openly. A hug transcends words. It speaks directly to the heart, creating a moment of unity that reflects the deep, universal need for connection. It is in these brief, unspoken moments that we're reminded of the divine spark within each of us, the essence that binds us together as human beings. So, the next time a man hugs you, pause for a moment. Recognize the significance of that embrace, however fleeting it may be. In that moment, you are witnessing an unspoken dialogue, a gesture that reflects not just his humanity but yours as well. A hug is never just an action. It is a bridge, a reminder of the beauty and complexity of connection in a world that desperately needs it. When you ask yourself what it means to be a nice guy, you're really asking what it means to be agreeable. It's easy to mistake agreeableness for kindness. Being agreeable, after all, means being easy to get along with, accommodating, and saying what people want to hear. In the short term, this might seem like a good thing, but the problem arises when it becomes habitual, when your life revolves around pleasing others at the cost of your own principles, identity, and sense of purpose. That's when the trouble begins. The nice guy is not truly nice, he's just afraid. He's afraid of conflict, rejection, and not being liked. This fear makes him small, shrinks his potential, and traps him in a cycle of self-sacrifice and resentment. He goes along with others' desires without considering his own, bending over backward in the hope that he will somehow win favor or at least avoid disapproval. But what he doesn't realize is that in sacrificing himself for the sake of others, he's slowly losing his own worth. You might think that this is a path to happiness, that being agreeable, being nice, will bring peace. But let's face it, peace at what cost? It's the peace of the coward, the peace of someone who avoids confrontation at any cost, even if it means losing his own soul in the process. And in the end, it's not peace, it's self-deception. True kindness, real strength, doesn't lie in hiding from confrontation. It lies in being able to stand your ground, to set boundaries, and to demand respect. You can't truly help others if you haven't first helped yourself, and you can't do that if you're constantly placing yourself last in the hopes of winning some imaginary reward. The nice guy is a martyr in his own life story, and martyrdom never leads to greatness. What you need, if you want to stop being the nice guy, is to start telling the truth. This means not just telling the truth to others, but telling the truth to yourself. Stop lying about your wants, desires, and needs. Stop telling yourself that you're fine when you're not. Stop pretending that you can always be the one who gives with nothing in return. Stop avoiding the tough conversations, the difficult moments, and the things that challenge you to grow. The nice guy avoids these things because he's afraid of the potential pain, but it's that very pain that builds you into someone worth listening to, someone capable of leading others. You must take responsibility for your life. That means accepting the fact that you are not here to serve as a side character in someone else's narrative. You are the hero of your own story, and if you don't start acting like it, then who will? Being nice doesn't mean being weak, and it doesn't mean being a doormat. True kindness comes from strength, from knowing who you are and being willing to stand up for it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it brings conflict. Most importantly, stop looking for external validation. The nice guy craves approval because he feels empty inside, as if his worth depends on what others think of him. But that's a false path. Your worth is intrinsic, and it's something you need to discover on your own. No one else can give it to you, and no one else can take it away. You have to stop outsourcing your self-esteem. The moment you stop seeking approval from others and start demanding respect for who you are, that's the moment your life will begin to change. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Being a nice guy is not about being kind or generous, it's about weakness disguised as virtue. Stop hiding behind politeness. Start standing tall in your truth. Start being who you truly are, imperfect, flawed, but strong enough to face the world with integrity. That's you. When you decide to stop being the nice guy, you're not simply deciding to stop being nice. You're deciding to stop lying to yourself and to others. You're deciding to stop compromising your identity and your principles in a misguided attempt to avoid conflict. You are setting yourself on a path to true authenticity, to being the best version of yourself, not because it is easy, but because it is necessary for your growth and for your life to have meaning. The problem with being a nice guy is that it stems from a deep insecurity. It's a kind of dependency and attachment to the approval of others. The nice guy is often caught in a toxic cycle. The more he sacrifices his own needs for others, the more he feels resentful, but the more he hides that resentment, the deeper the cycle becomes. And that resentment, however hidden or unconscious, erodes your sense